The spaceport was alive with motion. Ships of all shapes and sizes hovered, their engines humming in a low, steady rhythm, mixing with the chatter of merchants, travelers, and laborers moving goods across the bustling corridors. Cale adjusted the strap of his bag, pulling it tighter across his shoulder as he moved through the crowd. He kept his head down, walking like any ordinary traveler, though his eyes were sharp and alert. Years as a mercenary had taught him to notice everything: the subtle tension in someone's stance, the quick glance that betrayed fear, the way a person carried themselves in public. He had come to this colony planet not for work, at least not officially. It was a quiet place on the map, a settlement that many corporations ignored, which meant it was safe for someone like him to blend in for a while. But even safety had its costs. Cale could feel it in the air, the subtle pressure of change, the undercurrent of unease. Something was coming, though he could not yet name it. As he passed a busy trading area, a figure caught his eye.
A woman negotiating with a pair of traders, her voice steady, her movements confident.
There was something familiar about her. He couldn't place it at first. She gestured with her hands, demonstrating something invisible, explaining terms with patience and precision. She smiled briefly, but only when she was sure no one was watching too closely. That careful, measured smile, he had seen it before. Cale paused a few steps back, watching her. He remembered the day clearly. It was years ago, on a planet torn by conflict. A rebellion had flared in the cities, and the skies had been filled with fire and smoke. Cale had been there on a mission, one that most mercenaries would not touch. The civilians were trapped between factions, helpless, and he had made a choice. Not for money, not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. He had saved a small group of children during that chaos, carrying them through ruined streets and dodging danger at every turn. And among them had been Leora. She had been no older than 10, clinging to her mother's hand, eyes wide with fear. He remembered the way she had hesitated at a narrow bridge over a flooded canal, how he had gently urged her forward, encouraging her, giving her the courage she could not find on her own. That child had grown into the woman he now saw, strong and capable. Yet there was a flicker of the same hesitancy in her eyes, a shadow of caution that mirrored those days long past. Cale hesitated. Should he approach? Would she even remember? It had been years, and he had been careful to keep his identity hidden in the intervening time. But a small slip, a phrase she used, a turn of her hand, the tilt of her head, confirmed it. She was the same child he had saved. Recognition had not yet sparked in her eyes, but it would, he knew, if he spoke carefully. He took a deep breath, letting the crowd swallow him as he moved closer. Cale had always been skilled at blending in, at becoming invisible, until it was necessary to reveal himself. He waited for the right moment, watching her negotiate, listening to the calm authority in her voice. Even now, she commanded respect without needing to raise it forcibly. That was remarkable. Humanity had a way of surprising him, even after all these years spent on the edge of survival. As he stepped closer, Cale's mind wandered back to that day long ago. He remembered the fear in Leora's eyes, the way her small hand had gripped his arm as he guided her through debris-filled streets. He remembered the quiet promise he had made to himself then, to protect those who could not protect themselves. It had been a simple promise, but one that had shaped every choice he had made since. That promise had brought him here, to this crowded spaceport, to this woman negotiating with merchants as if she had been born to lead. Finally, he reached her side. Leora? His voice was careful, low, carrying only enough weight to hint at familiarity without startling her. She turned sharply, her eyes narrowing at the sound. For a moment, she looked at him like any stranger might, sizing him up. Then she paused, recognition flickering, a shadow of curiosity mixing with caution.
"You? Do I know you?"
she asked, her tone polite but guarded. Cale gave a small, almost imperceptible smile.
"Perhaps from a long time ago," he said.
"I think I may have saved your life once." Her eyes widened slightly, and Kale could see the recognition sparking, a puzzle assembling in her mind. She studied him, searching for answers in the lines of his face, the set of his jaw, the way he carried himself. Something clicked. She remembered the child she had been, the terror of those streets, the stranger who had guided her to safety.
You,
You saved me, she whispered, more to herself than to him. Kale nodded, not moving closer, giving her space. I did. I didn't expect to see you again. Leora's gaze softened, but there was still caution there. I never forgot.
I've wondered what happened to you.
Her voice carried no accusation, only curiosity. Kale shrugged lightly. Life took its turns. I've been busy. There was truth in the statement, though it was measured. He had been busy, yes, but always with the promise he made to protect those who could not protect themselves. For a moment, silence fell between them. The crowd moved around them, unaware of the connection forming in the quiet space they had carved out. Hale studied her more closely. She had grown strong, independent, capable of handling herself. Yet he could see traces of the same child who had clung to his arm, hesitant and unsure, waiting for guidance. She had learned to survive, to negotiate, to lead, but the core of her humanity, the courage and heart that had shown even then, remained intact.
You shouldn't be here, she said finally, a note of warning in her voice.
This place, it's not safe for someone like you.
You're a mercenary!
Kale smiled faintly. I've learned to be careful, and sometimes being a mercenary helps in places like this. He let the statement hang, implying more than he said. Being careful was not just about survival. It was about knowing when to act, when to intervene, when to protect. Leora studied him, weighing the words, reading between the lines. She was sharp, intelligent, a product of the years of struggle she had endured. I suppose I never thought the person who saved me would be someone like you.
There was no judgment in her voice, only wonder.
Kale looked away for a moment, scanning the busy corridors of the spaceport. People surprise each other, he said. Sometimes in ways we don't expect. The memory of that day, the chaos, the fear, the courage, was vivid. He could see the streets filled with smoke, hear the distant shouts, feel the tension as he led the children to safety. And now, seeing Leora grown, strong, capable, he understood something profound. The human spirit could endure, could grow, and could shine even in the darkest moments. That was what HFY was all about, that quiet, enduring strength that did not need weapons or violence to prevail. Leora nodded slowly, as if coming to a realization herself. I remember you now. More clearly than I thought I would. I remember your face, your voice, the way you helped me when I was afraid.
I never knew who you were.
Kale gave a faint smile.
I didn't need recognition then. I just needed to do what was right. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion further down the corridor.
A group of traders was arguing with a visitor, and the tension was palpable, though no violence erupted. Kale's eyes flicked toward it, assessing, calculating. He could sense when situations might spiral, when intervention could prevent harm. It was instinct, honed over years of necessity. Leora followed his gaze.
You still notice everything, she said, almost as an observation, not a question.
It comes with the territory, Kale said. I've learned to pay attention. People need help in ways they don't always see. For a moment, the spaceport seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, connected by a shared history, by survival, by a sense of duty that transcended time. Kale realized then that the reunion was more than chance. It was a reminder of what it meant to act selflessly, to take risks for others, to protect humanity's best qualities.
Will you
Stay? Leora asked quietly. Not just here, but… Not just here, but…
Nearby.
Your skills. Things are… complicated. Kale considered the question. He had been alone for so long, drifting from one place to another, one job to the next. But now, seeing the person he had once saved, seeing how she had grown, he felt a pull he had not expected. To help her, to help this colony, to be part of something larger than himself. It was a chance to honor the promise he had made all those years ago.
I'll stay, he said finally.
For a while, until things settle. Leora smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that lit her face. It was a small thing, but Kale felt the warmth of it deeply. The human spirit was resilient, capable of hope and courage in ways that could not be measured. And here, in this crowded spaceport on a distant planet, that spirit was alive. The two of them walked together through the corridors, side by side but not too close. There was respect in the space between them, understanding. Kale could feel it. The quiet power of human ingenuity, compassion, and bravery. It was not in weapons or dominance, but in courage, cleverness, and the determination to protect others. That was the essence of HFY, and he was reminded of it now, more vividly than ever. As they moved, Kale thought about the challenges that lay ahead. The colony was facing pressures it did not yet fully understand. Outsiders were always looking to take advantage of such places, seeking resources, wealth, or control. But humans had ways of surviving, of protecting what mattered most. And together, he and Leora could help ensure that this colony thrived, not through force, but through intelligence, courage, and resilience. For the first time in a long while, Kale felt a sense of purpose beyond his own survival. He had saved a life once. Now, perhaps, he could help preserve a community, guide a generation, and remind humanity of its best qualities. And as they reached the edge of the market, Kale glanced at Leora. She met his gaze, steady and unwavering. There was recognition there, yes, but more than that. Trust, the kind of trust that came from shared history, from courage, and from the understanding that humans could rise above fear and uncertainty. That was a power no mercenary, no outsider, no force could ever take away. The day was fading as Kale and Leora walked through the colony. The streets were a mixture of dust and metal, evidence of hurried construction and expansion. People bustled from building to building, their faces focused but welcoming. Even in the fading light, the settlement had a sense of life, as if it were growing stronger with every passing hour. Leora led Kale toward a small administrative building at the edge of the main plaza. It was simple, functional, but organized, with maps of the colony pinned on the walls, notes detailing resources and population clusters, and communication devices humming quietly in the background. She moved with purpose, showing him that she was not just a survivor. She was a leader. Kale followed silently, observing the systems she had set in place. There were no soldiers, no guards, just ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Merchants managing trade, engineers coordinating repairs, educators planning lessons for children. Everything was coordinated with efficiency, creativity, and patience. Humans were capable of remarkable order when they worked together, he thought. That was a form of strength that no weapon could replace. Here, Leora said, motioning to a holographic display in the center of the room. It projected a map of the colony and the surrounding area.
We've been monitoring some movements outside the settlement. Nothing too dangerous yet, but some outsiders are exploring the borders.
They might be scouting for resources. She paused, watching Kale carefully. I could use your insight. You know how to read situations like this. You can see patterns others can't. Kale stepped forward, studying the map.
I've learned to notice small details, he said. The path they take, how they interact with the environment, even what they avoid tells you a lot.
He traced the movements on the map with his finger, showing her where the scouts had been and predicting where they might go next.
They're testing, probing.
If they find anything of value, they'll return with more. Leora nodded. And we need to be ready before that happens. But we can't just hide or block them. They're too many and too organized. We have to use our brains, not just our numbers. Kale smiled faintly. This was exactly the kind of challenge he thrived on. Not fighting, not destruction, but clever planning, human ingenuity in action. Then we'll find a way to outsmart them, not with weapons, but with strategy. Over the next few hours, they worked together, examining trade routes, resource points, and the surrounding terrain. Kale suggested small modifications to the layout of storage areas, ways to funnel traffic so that the settlers could observe outsiders without being noticed. Leora contributed her knowledge of local customs and human behavior, predicting how the outsiders would respond to various signals and obstacles. Their partnership grew naturally, a combination of Kale's experience and Leora's intuition. She began to relax around him, asking more questions, listening to his advice. He told her stories of past missions, careful to avoid details that might cause concern. She shared her vision for the colony, the plans she had for schools, trade systems, and sustainable agriculture. Together, they began to see a picture of the colony not just surviving, but thriving. As the sun set, casting golden light across the metal rooftops, Kale and Leora stepped outside. The streets were quieter now, children heading home, merchants closing their stalls, the hum of machinery softening. Kale noticed how the people moved with purpose and cooperation. Every individual seemed to contribute to the whole, proving that humanity's greatest strength was not in weapons or wealth, but in intelligence, compassion, and collaboration. Do you ever wonder why humans can thrive even in the harshest conditions? Leora asked quietly, glancing at him. Kale thought for a moment. It's because we adapt. We help each other. We survive not because we're stronger than others, but because we're clever, resilient, and willing to do what's right when it matters most. Leora smiled. I like that. It's why I believe this colony can last, even when outsiders come. Kale nodded, looking toward the horizon. The landscape beyond the colony was rough, rocky hills and sparse forests, but it held potential. There were hidden paths, safe vantage points, and natural barriers. It was a place where clever thinking could outweigh brute force. Over the next days, Kale helped the settlers implement the strategies they had devised. They set up observation points, created signals to alert each other of approaching outsiders, and organized groups to manage trade and supplies. Kale worked alongside ordinary people, teaching them how to notice patterns, predict outcomes, and act decisively without fear. Leora observed him closely, noticing how naturally he guided people without commanding them. He didn't order, he suggested. He didn't demand. He inspired. The settlers began to trust him, not because of reputation, but because they saw his skill and moral code in action. Kale's quiet heroism reminded Leora of the man who had saved her all those years ago, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude and admiration. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the colony, Kale and Leora walked along a ridge overlooking the settlement. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faint scent of metal, dust, and vegetation. They spoke quietly, planning the next steps.
We need to anticipate the outsiders' moves,
Kale said.
They'll look for resources that are easy to exploit, but we can protect them without confrontation.
Clever distractions, alternative routes, signals to redirect them. Things that don't hurt anyone.
Leora nodded.
And if they test our patience? If they try to push too far? Kale's eyes met hers. Then we respond the same way humans always have, with intelligence, teamwork, and persistence. Violence is not the only answer. There are other ways to win, ways that leave humanity intact. For the first time, Leora felt truly reassured. Kale was more than a mercenary. He was a protector, a strategist, and a moral compass in a world that often ignored conscience. Together, they represented the best of what humans could be: courageous, clever, and compassionate. The colony's people began to notice the subtle changes. Supplies moved more efficiently, communication improved, and the settlers began to act in coordinated ways that even impressed Kale. The outsiders who had been scouting around were now puzzled. Unable to predict the colony's response, each small victory achieved without violence strengthened the settlers' confidence and their sense of community. Kael and Leora spent long hours planning, but they also shared stories, memories, and laughter. She told him about her childhood after that day he had saved her, how she had dreamed of building a community that could withstand challenges. He shared his own journey, the missions, the choices, and the quiet moments of satisfaction when humanity had triumphed without destruction. One day, a young settler approached them with a problem. A group of traders had arrived, looking to claim resources without understanding local needs. Kael and Leora analyzed the situation together, crafting a solution that satisfied both parties. They negotiated terms, explained the value of cooperation, and created a system where everyone benefited. The young settler watched in awe, learning that strength came from intelligence and morality, not force. As the weeks passed, Kael realized something profound. Saving lives in the past had been important, yes, but helping this colony survive, guiding humans to act wisely and compassionately, was an even greater achievement. Humanity's power was not in the battles fought, but in the minds, hearts, and spirits that refused to give up, that sought clever solutions, that lifted each other when the world tried to push them down. Leora noticed the change in him, too. He was no longer the solitary mercenary drifting through life. He was part of something larger, a force for good, a reminder that humans were capable of extraordinary things when they worked together. She felt pride, gratitude, and hope for the future. The child he had saved had grown into a leader, and now the man who had saved her as a child was guiding them all. One evening, as the colony gathered to celebrate a small but important success, the opening of a new school and the completion of a communal water system, Kael stood quietly at the edge of the crowd. He watched children run freely, settlers exchanging smiles and words of encouragement, and Leora standing at the center, radiating confidence and calm authority. It was a scene of humanity at its best. He felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he had known. This was why he had come here. Not for money, not for recognition, but to witness the triumph of intelligence, compassion, and courage. The colony was thriving not because of his presence, but because humans had chosen to act wisely, to collaborate, and to care for each other. That was HFY in its purest form. As the twin moons climbed higher in the sky, Kael approached Leora.
"They're ready," he said quietly. "All of them."
They understand now. We've done more than survive. We've built something strong.
Leora smiled.
And it's just the beginning. With your help, I think we can keep it growing, no matter what comes next.
Kael nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility and the thrill of possibility. There would be challenges ahead, but he knew one thing for certain. As long as humans acted with intelligence, courage, and compassion, they could overcome anything. Together they looked over the colony, the streets filled with life and hope, and Kael realized that this was more than a mission. It was a reminder of why humanity was remarkable. Every small action, every clever idea, every act of kindness contributed to something greater. And in that moment, he understood that the best part of humanity was not just surviving, but thriving together without losing what made them human. The night was quiet now. The hum of the settlement softened to a gentle rhythm. Kael and Leora stood side by side, ready for whatever came next, confident in the knowledge that humans, when united, could accomplish wonders.
The colony had grown busier over the past weeks.
Kael and Leora's plans were taking shape, and the settlers were more confident in their abilities. Observation posts were manned, communication signals were in place, and trade routes were carefully monitored. Even so, the outsiders were persistent. They had become bolder, sending scouts along different paths, testing the colony's defenses, searching for resources, and probing for weaknesses. Kael studied the latest reports with a careful eye. Small clusters of travelers had been spotted near the edges of the settlement, moving in patterns that suggested scouting rather than simple curiosity. He traced their routes on the holographic map, noticing how they approached and retreated, almost as if they were learning about the land as they went.
They're testing our reactions, Kale said quietly to Leora.
They want to see how we respond, where we are vulnerable, and how fast we can adapt. Leora nodded. We can't let them get ahead of us. The settlers need to understand that they have a role, too. Everyone contributes. Over the next several days, Kale and Leora began organizing the settlers into small groups, each with clear tasks. Some observed the perimeter and reported any unusual activity. Others maintained resource depots, ensuring nothing was missing or wasted. Still others coordinated trade with visiting merchants, creating distractions and diversions that drew the outsiders' attention away from sensitive areas. Kale was impressed by the settlers' adaptability. Ordinary people who had once been fearful and hesitant were now thinking critically, acting independently, and solving problems together. They were human in their purest form, clever, resilient, and collaborative. That was the strength of the colony, and Kale knew it could overcome any challenge without resorting to force. One afternoon, Kale noticed movement near the northern ridge, a path the outsiders had used before. He called Leora over, pointing out the figures approaching from a distance. They're splitting into smaller groups, he observed. They might be testing multiple routes at once. It's a clever tactic, but it makes them predictable if we watch carefully.
Leora studied the horizon. We'll need to make our moves carefully.
If we misjudge, it could create confusion among the settlers. But if we anticipate their actions, we can guide them without any confrontation. They devised a plan. Using natural barriers like hills and dense foliage, they created observation points where settlers could monitor the outsiders without being seen. Signals were established using mirrors and flags, simple yet effective ways to communicate across distances. Kale showed the settlers how to read patterns in movement, the pause before a group decides on a path, the spacing between individuals, even the way they approached certain areas. The outsiders moved through the terrain, unaware that every action was being observed. Kale and Leora were a step ahead, predicting their movements and guiding the settlers to respond efficiently. Every time the outsiders adjusted their approach, the settlers adapted seamlessly, demonstrating intelligence and coordination that impressed even Kale. During one observation session, Kale noticed a young scout from the colony struggling to interpret the outsiders' patterns. He approached quietly, crouching beside the child. "Watch their steps," he said. "Notice where they hesitate, where they avoid obstacles."
That tells you more than anything they say. The child followed his instructions, eyes wide with understanding. I see it. They're avoiding the rocks near the ridge. They want the easy path.
"Exactly," Kale said.
Now think about how we can use that. He smiled, watching the child's excitement grow.
This was human ingenuity at work, teaching, learning, and solving problems creatively. That was the kind of victory that required no force, only intelligence and courage. Leora watched the interaction, feeling a surge of pride. The settlers were learning not just from Kale, but from each other. Knowledge was spreading, and the community was growing stronger. "It's incredible to see," she said softly. "They're becoming more than just survivors. They're thinkers, planners, problem solvers." Kale nodded. "Humans have a way of rising to challenges. They surprise even those of us who think we've seen it all."
As the days went on, Kale and Leora implemented more complex strategies. Trade routes were adjusted to mislead outsiders, guiding them toward harmless areas where they could gather information but not access valuable resources.
Decoy signals were set up, and settlers were trained to communicate silently using subtle gestures. Every move was designed to protect the colony while teaching the settlers the value of observation, critical thinking, and cooperation. One evening, Kale and Leora convened a council with key settlers. They discussed the patterns they had observed, predicted the outsiders' next moves, and devised contingency plans. Leora facilitated the discussion, ensuring that everyone's voice was heard. Kale contributed insight and guidance, offering strategies without taking control. Together, they created a plan that relied on human intelligence, not weapons, and collaboration, not confrontation.
Remember, Kale said, addressing the council, our strength is not in fighting.
It's in thinking, observing, and acting together.
Every action you take can influence the outcome.
Use your minds, watch carefully, and trust each other. The settlers nodded, their confidence growing. They understood that they were capable of extraordinary things when united. Kale watched them with quiet satisfaction, knowing that they were becoming a community that could thrive even under pressure.
As night fell, the colony settled into a rhythm of quiet vigilance. Observation posts remained active, communication lines were maintained, and Kale and Leora reviewed every detail of the plan.
The outsiders had made their moves, but the colony had anticipated each one. Every attempt to gain information or resources was met with clever responses, redirection, and subtle guidance. One night, while reviewing maps in the administrative building, Kale reflected on the progress. The settlers had transformed from ordinary people into a community capable of strategy, problem-solving, and resilience. That was humanity at its finest, capable of growth, cooperation, and triumph without resorting to violence. Leora joined him, her expression thoughtful. They're learning fast, she said. Even the youngest ones are noticing patterns, predicting outcomes, helping each other.
It's amazing to watch. Kyle smiled. This is what humans do best.
We adapt, we learn.
We support each other.
Strength comes not from force, but from intelligence, courage, and compassion. In the following days, Kale and Leora continued to refine the colony's defenses and strategies. They created training exercises that simulated possible scenarios, teaching settlers how to respond to new challenges creatively and effectively. Outsiders were observed as they approached, guided unknowingly by the settlers' clever actions, and every time they made a move, the colony adapted seamlessly. During one exercise, a group of young settlers demonstrated their understanding of pattern recognition by predicting where a small group of outsiders might attempt to access resources. They set up harmless diversions and signals, redirecting the outsiders without confrontation. Kale watched with quiet pride, realizing that these ordinary humans had become extraordinary problem solvers. Leora joined him, a note of wonder in her voice.
They did it on their own. They understood what to do without being told exactly.
They're thinking like we do now, Kale nodded. That's the point.
Humans can teach themselves, learn from each other, and achieve remarkable things when they act together.
As the colony continued to thrive, Kale and Leora began to discuss the future.
They planned long-term strategies for resource management, communication networks, and trade systems. They emphasized cooperation, intelligence, and moral guidance, showing settlers how to act decisively while remaining ethical. Every decision reinforced the HFY theme. Humanity was capable of incredible feats when guided by courage, ingenuity, and compassion. One evening, standing atop a ridge overlooking the settlement, Kale reflected on how far the colony had come. The outsiders had tested them repeatedly, yet the humans had adapted every time. They had learned to anticipate, communicate, and cooperate, using cleverness instead of force. That was a triumph in itself, a victory that required no weapons and caused no harm. Leora joined him quietly, her eyes on the horizon.
They're ready for anything now, she said, not because of us, but because they've learned to think, to act, and to trust one another.
That's what makes them strong. Kale nodded, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The settlers were more than just survivors. They were thinkers, planners, and collaborators. Humanity had proven once again that courage and intelligence could overcome challenges without violence. As night fell, the colony remained vigilant but calm. Observation posts continued their quiet work. Settlers moved with purpose, and Kale and Leora watched over them with pride. The outsiders had been outsmarted at every turn, guided unknowingly by the humans' intelligence, observation, and cooperation. In that moment, Kale realized that this was the true essence of HFY: humanity thriving, growing, and protecting itself through cleverness, morality, and teamwork. Every small action, every clever plan, every act of observation contributed to a greater good. And as Kale and Leora stood together overlooking the colony, they knew that no challenge could break the spirit of humans who acted with courage, intelligence, and compassion. The outsiders might test them, but the humans had learned to adapt, think, and work together. That was strength beyond measure, a quiet triumph that no weapon could ever match. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of metal, dust, and distant vegetation. Kale and Leora remained on the ridge, side by side, confident that the colony would continue to thrive. Every glance at the settlement reminded them of what humans could achieve when united, guided by intelligence, and motivated by the desire to protect each other. In the days ahead, challenges would come. New problems would arise. But Kale knew one thing: humanity's best qualities, cleverness, courage, and compassion, were stronger than any obstacle. The settlers were ready, and together they would face whatever the future held. The sun rose slowly over the colony, painting the dusty streets and metal rooftops with a soft golden light. The twin moons had faded into the early morning sky, leaving the settlers with a quiet sense of calm. But beneath that calm, Kale and Leora knew that the outsiders were still observing, still testing, still probing for weaknesses. Today would be decisive, not through confrontation, but through human ingenuity. Kale stood at the edge of the main plaza, watching the settlers prepare for the day. He could see the difference between now and a few weeks ago: confidence in their steps, sharp focus in their eyes, and a sense of purpose that radiated from every action. The young children who had once clung to the older settlers now carried messages, observed patterns, and even suggested clever improvements to trade flows. Every individual was part of the colony's intelligence network, each contributing to a plan greater than themselves. Leora joined him, carrying a small map with new markings and routes. "They've been testing us all morning," she said.
They think they understand our movements, but we've anticipated them.
Kale smiled faintly. It's not just anticipation.
It's adaptation. Humans learn quickly when they observe, experiment, and collaborate.
Leora nodded. Then let's show them what humans can do without ever raising a hand in violence. Over the next few hours, the outsiders approached the colony in their usual scattered groups, hoping to gather information and locate valuable resources. Kale and Leora directed the settlers with quiet signals, subtle gestures, and prearranged codes. The colonists moved like a well-oiled machine. Supplies were shifted, paths were subtly blocked, and harmless diversions guided the outsiders away from critical areas. At one point, a group of outsiders approached a storage depot. Kale signaled the nearby settler, who adjusted a series of mirrors to catch the sunlight, reflecting bright flashes in a pattern. The outsiders paused, curious but cautious. Another settler had laid out decoy containers filled with ordinary materials, cleverly disguised to look like valuable resources. The outsiders moved toward them, inspecting carefully, only to find that the real resources were untouched. Leora observed from a ridge, her eyes following the patterns. "They're learning too," she said.
"They're trying to adapt, but every move we've made anticipates them." Kale nodded. "That's the key."
"They may have numbers, but we have understanding. We see, we think, and we act together. That's a power they can't match." The outsiders continued their approach, testing the colony from multiple angles. Yet every time they tried something new, they encountered clever diversions, signals, and adaptations. Settlers communicated silently, directing each other, predicting moves, and adjusting strategies in real time. It was a human dance of intelligence and cooperation, executed flawlessly without a single act of violence. During a particularly clever maneuver, The outsiders attempted to follow a trade route to a resource depot. Kale had predicted this and instructed the settlers to use natural terrain to guide them. Hills and shallow ravines funneled the outsiders along a harmless path that led them away from the colony's central stores. The outsiders, unaware, followed obediently, thinking they were observing the colony, but in reality, they were being subtly guided. From the ridge, Kale and Leora exchanged a glance.
It's working, Kale said quietly. They don't even realize it.
Leora smiled. Humans are capable of extraordinary things when we work together. The settlers had learned quickly. Young scouts used binoculars to track movements, relaying information through hand signals. Engineers adjusted pathways and obstacles to mislead the outsiders. Traders used clever negotiations and distractions to divert attention from critical areas. Every citizen was a participant in the strategy, demonstrating ingenuity, courage, and intelligence. Kale realized that this was the true triumph of humanity. Not force, but cleverness, observation, and moral action.
As the day progressed, the outsiders began to show signs of frustration.
Every attempt to access valuable resources or learn about the colony's operations was met with careful anticipation and redirection. They began to understand that the humans were not only aware of their presence but were always a step ahead, thinking, adapting, and responding with cleverness. Kale and Leora decided it was time to demonstrate the full extent of their strategy. They gathered the settlers and positioned them along key points in the colony, each with a specific task. The plan was simple in its brilliance. Redirect the outsiders toward a series of decoys, while simultaneously allowing the colony to operate without interference. It was a combination of observation, logic, and coordination that required everyone to act with precision and trust. The outsiders moved in as expected, and the plan unfolded perfectly. Decoy containers, reflective signals, and clever diversions guided them away from critical areas. Every movement had been anticipated, and the settlers executed each step flawlessly. The outsiders, trying to adapt, found themselves outmatched not by weapons but by intelligence, coordination, and foresight. Kyle watched, impressed by the settlers' performance.
They've learned,
He said. They see patterns, they anticipate outcomes, and they act confidently. This is more than survival. It's mastery.
Leora nodded, her eyes shining with pride.
And they did it themselves. We guided them, yes, but they executed the plan. That's the true power of humanity. The outsiders, recognizing that they were being outsmarted at every turn, began to withdraw. They realized that brute force or deception would not yield the results they hoped for. The colony had demonstrated a power they could not overcome: intelligence, adaptability, and cooperation. Kale and Leora allowed them to leave, understanding that the lesson had been taught without harm or confrontation. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the settlement, the settlers gathered in the central plaza. Children ran freely, playing and laughing, while adults exchanged stories and observations from the day. Kyle and Leora stood at the edge, watching with quiet satisfaction. Every citizen had contributed, every action had mattered, and every individual had been part of the victory. Leora turned to Kale, her expression thoughtful. They'll remember this. Not just the colony, but what it represents. Humans working together, thinking, adapting.
They'll know that intelligence and cooperation can surpass numbers and aggression.
Kale nodded. That's the essence of humanity. We thrive not because we fight, but because we think, observe, and act with courage and compassion. That's our real strength. The settlers began to celebrate in small ways. Songs were sung, laughter echoed through the streets, and small lanterns were lit to honor the day's success. There was a sense of achievement, not from defeating an enemy, but from demonstrating the power of intelligence, cooperation, and moral courage. Kale and Leora moved through the crowd, quietly acknowledging the efforts of individuals, praising clever ideas, and sharing in the pride of the community. That night, Kale found a quiet spot overlooking the settlement. The stars shone bright above, untainted by pollution. and the twin moons hung low in the sky. He reflected on the journey, from saving a child in a distant rebellion to guiding a colony to clever victory. Humanity's potential had always been remarkable, but seeing it in action, witnessing ordinary people rise to extraordinary challenges, filled him with awe. Leora joined him silently, standing side by side. "It's more than I imagined," she said. "We've shown them that humans can solve problems, protect each other, and thrive without ever hurting anyone. That's what makes us strong." Kale smiled faintly. "It's what I hoped to see. Not just survival, but growth, courage, and intelligence. That's humanity at its best." They watched the settlement below, lights flickering as families settled in for the night. The young scouts and engineers still moved about, quietly observing, learning, and improving. The colony had become a living example of human ingenuity and moral strength, a place where cleverness and compassion guided every action. As the nights passed, the outsiders did not return in force. They had learned their lesson, not through fear, but through observation of human skill and intelligence. The colony continued to grow, expanding trade networks, improving infrastructure, and educating children in ways that emphasized creativity, cooperation, and ethical problem-solving. Every day was a lesson in the power of humanity, and every individual contributed to the collective strength. Kale and Leora often walked together, discussing future strategies and sharing thoughts on human potential. "They'll remember this," Leora said. "The outsiders, the settlers. They'll all remember what it means to act wisely, think creatively, and protect each other. That's the story that will last."
Kale nodded. "It's a story worth telling."
Not of battles or victories over enemies, but of triumph through intelligence, courage, and compassion. That's what makes humans remarkable. As the colony continued to thrive, Kale realized that his journey was complete. He had saved a life long ago, guided a settlement to clever victory, and witnessed firsthand the best of humanity. The settlers had learned, grown, and proven that intelligence, teamwork, and moral courage could overcome any challenge. Leora smiled at him, the pride in her eyes reflecting the stars above. "We did it," she said softly. Kale's gaze swept over the settlement, now quiet, strong, and full of life.
"No," he said. "They did it."
"We only guided them. The real triumph is theirs. Humanity's strength lies in every individual who chooses to think, to act, and to care. That's something no one can take away." And as the twin moons rose again, casting silver light over the thriving colony, Kale and Leora stood together watching the settlers move through their home. The outsiders had been outsmarted, yes, but the true victory was far greater. A community of humans, united, intelligent, and compassionate, thriving in a way that no force could ever destroy. It was the quiet power of humanity, the essence of HFY, proof that courage, intelligence, and compassion could shape the future. And in that moment, Kale knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, humanity would always find a way to rise, to thrive, and to triumph through wisdom.